Hi. Is it time for an update? It feels like it's time for an update. Okay, before I start to ramble, I'm just gonna open up with the important bit, and that is the script is done. It was a long road to get here. I think this is like the 17th or 18th draft, but now it's done and I can go full on into actually making the episode now. Now, I wasn't just writing over the last month or so. I've also been able to bring on 4 artists because of the money that was raised on Patreon, so thank you so much to everybody who pitched in. At the moment, I've got a character designer, a mechanical designer, and 2 people on backgrounds, which is good because episode 2 has a lot more locations than the first episode. With the first episode of Song in the Sky, I was more or less playing directly into my lack of drawing ability, because there's really only 2 major backgrounds in the entire thing. There's the sky and there's the cockpit, but since the second episode takes place in the city and in numerous different locations and flashbacks and all kinds of stuff, I needed artists to get that done. And now I can, so thank you so much to all the people on Patreon. But yeah, that's the big news. The script is done, and that's honestly the main reason why I haven't been able to post any updates until now, just because there wasn't really anything to update. There's not really much I can say when I'm just sitting at a computer screen, typing away draft after draft after draft, and regretting my life choices. It's not very photogenic. But now that I am done with the most boring part of production, I'm actually gonna see if I can start making more regular updates. I'm thinking either once a week or once every 2 weeks. I really want to keep everybody on board with this as it progresses so that you know that the production is going smoothly and that I am completely dedicated to getting it done. So yeah, script's done, artists are on board, budget's in place, pretty much everything's looking good. Next up comes the pre-production phase, which means concept art and drawing storyboards and that kind of fun stuff. And I'll keep you guys updated along the way. So all of you guys who are just interested in the update, you can leave now, but if you want to know a little bit more about how the writing process went, then you can stick around while I, ramble a bit. So basically over the course of the month, I went over, I want to say, 4 different versions of this. There was the original version, which was one that I wrote last year when I was writing all of the different episodes of Song in the Sky all at once, and that was very much a sort of slice of life episode, I guess. You got dumped into the battle scene in the first episode, and then episode 2 was not really anything happening. It was mostly just an introduction to the city and the characters and whatnot. And then after I made the pilot, a lot of things changed during the course of production. Basically, I won't really go into details because I don't really want to spoil anything, but there were major aspects of the story and lore that only got added about halfway into the animation process, and as a result, the entire next episode had to be pretty much rewritten from scratch if it was going to make any sense. So that led on to version 2, which was the Scrubs version, which I call it that because it was actually pretty heavily inspired by the beats of a certain Scrubs episode, which I will not give away because, again, that also might be a spoiler. But that didn't really work, and then that moved on to version 3, which was a Battlestar Galactica episode, which I also won't really go into because it also might be a spoiler. And then that finally led to version 4, which is where I think the script finally found its legs, and it's very much its own thing. Although it is also kind of a lost episode now. But I really needed to get this script right before I started doing anything else, because I learned from experience, again, when I was making the first episode, I was, if I'm being honest, kind of winging it with the script, and then that meant that after I had already edited and animated a large portion of the episode, I ended up rewriting it, and I had to bring in actors to re-record, reanimate parts of it, and the whole thing was just kind of a crapshoot that ended up adding a lot of time unnecessarily to the production, whereas if I just spent another week or 2 writing the script, all of that could have been avoided. And now that I have other artists on board, it's even more important because I don't want them to be making backgrounds or concept art that's not going to be used in the final version. I'm not a one-man show anymore, so I can't afford to make these kinds of time-consuming mistakes. So if that means spending a little bit more time on the outset, getting the script to a good place where I know it's not going to need any revisions during production, I'm willing to take that. Also, yes, that is a red panda back there. His name is Tony, and before you ask, no, I have not seen Agretsuko yet. I have heard it's really cute, and I'm planning to watch it because my favorite things in the world are death metal and red pandas, so I will get around to it. But yeah, if I'm being brutally honest, it did take me longer to write the script than it probably should have, so if I can make the best out of the situation, here are 5 lessons that I learned while writing this script that hopefully you can apply to your own writing projects. Number 1, and I know this sounds really obvious, but actually write a script. I know that sounds weird, but I have a lot of animator friends who don't actually take the time to write a screenplay for their animations. Instead, they just start from the storyboarding phase, and that can be great scene to scene, and I think it's good for certain directors. I know Miyazaki mainly works from storyboards, but most of the time, if you start from there and don't actually write a script, you're gonna end up with something that's really good moment to moment, but kind of falls apart in the long run. Like if you look at Samurai Jack, which was made pretty much entirely in the storyboarding phase, it's great scenes that add up to generally kind of underwhelming episodes. And I know I love Samurai Jack as much as anyone else, but in general, if you take the time to actually write a screenplay, you'll end up with a much more cohesive final product, and it's definitely worth the time. What are you doing there, Tony? Number 2, write an outline. Don't just jump into your script without a plan. You need to have all the beats generally planned out before you actually start writing. This is not only going to make your script a lot more cohesive, it's also gonna make it a lot easier to write that first page, because if you know the general broad sweeps of where your script is going to go, then it's a lot easier to take that leap and actually start writing it, and you'll feel a lot less terrified of the first blank page. Number 3, have someone whose opinion you trust that can give you feedback. That is especially important when you're making fantasy or speculative fiction, because a lot of the time you know how your fictional world works, but the average bystander won't, because they're not as close to it as you are. So there could be aspects of the magic system, or the society, or the technology level that just doesn't really get across, and they'll be able to tell you that. And also, just in general, when you're writing a script, it is completely impossible for you to be 100% objective, so you need someone to act as a sounding board. Do you like Cannibal Corpse? Do you like a monomorph? Yes, you do. Number 4, if you're writing something that you're also going to be animating, manage your ambitions. Know what you can and cannot do. That means if you're not good at drawing backgrounds, then don't write an episode that has 15 different settings. If you're a frame-by-frame animator who works generally in 1s or 2s, don't write a 30-page script. You're not going to finish it. That's way too much work for just you. If you're actually going to make what you're setting out to make, then recognize your limitations, and on the flip side, recognize your strengths. Write something that plays to your strengths as an animator, as a director, as a storyteller, and you'll generally come out with a much better project that you'll actually end up finishing. And lastly, have a plan for dealing with writer's block, because there's a good chance you're going to run into it. When your inspiration runs out, you'll want to have a way to rekindle it and kind of get back in touch with what made you excited about the project in the first place. Usually what I do is I take a walk down the street. It's usually pretty nice, and there's lots of trees, and it's just a good way to kind of break out of whatever rut I've been in. Also, writing in a different venue is usually a good idea. Like if you've been slaving away in your dark, dank cave of a room for 15 hours, try going to a library to write, or just go out into the living room instead of staying in your bedroom, or go outside. Just change things up, and that doesn't just apply to location. Like, read some new books, watch some new movies or shows, look for new things, because if you don't have any new ideas, then you're not gonna write anything interesting. So bottom line, if you're stuck in a rut, don't keep banging your head against a wall until you get presumably knocked unconscious. Change your approach in some fashion, and that is when you're gonna get your inspiration back. So yeah, I think that's enough rambling. I'll see you guys in a week or two. Until then, goodbye.